Hey everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be doing my books I read during quarantine part 2. So just in case you guys missed part 1, I will have that linked down below for you guys, but basically these are just recent reads videos, but I took a break and I have read quite a few books since quarantine started, and I mean at the beginning I wasn't really able to read a lot, but then I kind of started to pick up again, so I have quite a few books that I need to do a recent reads video for, so I decided to do it as books I've read during quarantine and do it in 3 parts. Kind of 4 though, because like I've already kind of read enough for a 4th, but that's probably just going to be a recent reads video, but that is besides the point and does not matter. So the thumbnail for this one's going to look really sad because actually quite a few of the books for this portion of this series I read as ebooks, and quite a few of them were graphic novels because I was kind of like wanting some really quick stuff to read and boost up my Goodreads goal and get caught up, and I did, but then I fell back behind again, so like we're very on brand and thriving. Also, I don't know if I like this shirt, like I don't think I'm edgy enough to wear it, but I'm just gonna wear it and then see. It's also like way too big for me, but yeah, that also doesn't matter. So I will have all the titles that I'm mentioning in this video in the description box down below, as well as a timestamp, so if there's a specific book that you are waiting to hear me talk about, you can just click down below and go right to there. But let's just get into the video. So first up is a book that I had actually included in the part 1 thumbnail, but it's actually the first book for part 2, and that is Verona Comics by Jennifer Dugan. By the way, I will also have any reading vlogs where I read any of these books linked down below for you guys. I think I started this one in a reading vlog and then I didn't end up finishing it, and then I don't think I really have reading vlogs for any of the other ones because I had kind of taken a break at this point. So this is a YA contemporary novel that follows 2 characters. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet retelling. So you follow Riley and Jubilee, and they are the children of owners of these rival comic shops. So Jubilee is the stepdaughter of a woman who owns an indie comic shop, and then Riley is the son of this guy who owns like this big box store that is buying out all of these tiny indie shops. The 2 of them end up meeting at Comic-Con prom, and they end up starting a relationship from there. This is not really the fluffy YA contemporary that I was expecting it to be at all in any sense of the word. It's definitely way more intense than I was expecting. So Riley has a number of mental health issues. He has anxiety, depression, there's talks of suicidal ideation, and past suicide attempts are also mentioned, so do be wary of these triggers if going into the story. But while it is marketed as a romance and it wasn't so much that, I personally felt that the depictions of issues such as depression and anxiety were well done. It was a realistic sort of thought out character in Riley, and obviously those things kind of vary from person to person, but I felt like it showed that like slow progression into crisis very accurately. However, that realisticness did make it a bit of a harder read. There were lots of wholesome and sweet moments, but there were also a lot of moments that were very emotional and intense, and like I said, it definitely wasn't the fluffy romance that it's kind of marketed as, and the cover I feel like makes it seem more so like it would be a fluffy romance. Like it says on it they're falling for the competition, but it's not really that much of a romance at all. It's more so about Riley and his mental health issues and how Jubilee is starting this relationship with him and trying to help him through it in a healthy way. So those mental health issues aside, that is like a big part of the plot though, just a fair warning because you wouldn't really think it, and it's also not really mentioned in the synopsis. I mean, it does mention Riley's anxiety spirals, but I think that it kind of makes it seem like it's a minor side plot, but it definitely is more the main focus. But one thing that is mentioned in the synopsis is that Jubilee is a cellist and she has like this big competition coming up, but I forgot about that detail many times. It fell completely to the side and I was like, oh yeah, she's a cellist, like that's a thing. And I kind of wish that that musical side of her had been brought up a little bit more. Now, Jubilee's friends, on the other hand, I wish we hadn't gotten the chance to see that much of. Her friend group was very annoying. I understood they cared for her and had her best interests at heart, but I think at times they were a little bit overbearing, which just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The family dynamics, on the other hand, on Jubilee's side, I loved. She has 2 moms and they both love her so much and they have such a sweet relationship relationship and they're such caring people. Like, they were just a great family unit. But then on the other hand, you have Riley, who has a really toxic family situation, especially his relationship with his dad is just completely horrible. Like, his dad is a terrible person. So you kind of have both sides of the family there. You have like the really great picture perfect family that are so heartwarming, and then you have a family situation where you just want to help Riley, honestly. You just want to take him out of it and like help him from everything that's hurting him, and it's just, he's a very heartbreaking character. But this book also has more LGBTQ plus representation besides the fact that Jubilee has two moms. They are also both queer characters. So Jubilee isn't putting a label on her sexuality, she's still figuring things out, but Riley is bisexual. Now, like I mentioned, this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and I don't think I saw that mentioned anywhere else. I think I just realized when I started reading it, I was like, oh, okay, so we have Verona comics, which Verona is where Romeo and Juliet is set. And then you have two rival families. So I was like, and I don't know if I'm just like, I feel like I'm a detective and a sleuth. I think this is probably common knowledge to more people, but I had no clue it was a Romeo and Juliet retelling. But you also have Jubilee and Riley, which both start with like R, Romeo, Jubilee, J, Juliet. You know, I was like, I'm connecting the dots here, but it's really just like a geeky sort of twist on it, because there are some geeky elements to this as it is set in a comic shop. I do kind of wish that there would have been more geeky moments, but I think that's kind of because I was expecting this to be more of a like happy-go-lucky sort of romantic story, and it definitely wasn't. Like, I literally started reading it in a week where I was like, I'm gonna read fluffy YA contemporaries, and I was like, where's the fluff? Because this is not fluffy at all. It's real intense and emotional, but like I said, I do think it did a pretty good job of that. So the retelling aspect of it is super, super subtle. Obviously, like, it's not like completely the same at all, but I do think it took an interesting twist on that original iconic story. I think where this kind of fell off for me a little bit is the plot felt a little bit weak at times. I think it started out pretty strong, but it started to kind of peter out as I was reading it. In the beginning, it's kind of setting up a ticking time bomb sort of romance where there's, you know, I'm sure you've read them before. I've read quite a few of them, and usually like I hate it, but like I love it at the same time. So it's where it's dramatic irony essentially. So you have like two characters and there's something that the one character doesn't know, and it's going to like change everything. You know, it's going to go horribly wrong when that's revealed. But this instance, it kind of was just like shrug, like, okay, like there just wasn't that much of a conflict there. And I think that's where I was kind of like confused a little bit, because that was wrapped up super quickly and super neatly. So after that, I was kind of like, where's the story going? But it definitely was focused internally on Riley more so. So I think I did really like this. Well, I mean, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I was just laughing at myself because like, I think I really liked it. Like, it's like, I don't know, but no, I did enjoy it. I'm sorry if the angle's kind of different. I was just in the middle of wrapping up talking about this when my memory card was full, because I had my giant book haul on here and I never deleted that footage, and that was like 2 hours long. But anyways, I give this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was solid. It wasn't what I was expecting, and I think that's kind of where I had a bit of meh feelings about it. And also just the plot issues were there. Like, I had some issues with it, but overall it was enjoyable, and I think it did some really great things. So now we're moving on to the first book that I read the ebook for. Actually, I listened to the audiobook for this one while following along to that, and that is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This was actually my first Jason Reynolds book, but it definitely won't be my last. This is a story that is told in verse, and it is set over the course of 60 seconds as the main character is going down an elevator, and he is trying to decide whether or not he is going to avenge his brother's death. So he has like a gun in his pocket, and he's trying to decide whether he's going to use it or not. I've always meant to read some Jason Reynolds books before. They've definitely intrigued me, and this book I think was a great one to start out with. It like totally captivated me because he has such an expert knowledge of language. Novels in verse have been super doing it for me. I've been liking them a lot, like Elizabeth Acevedo, and then I don't think there's another one in, oh yeah, there is another one in this video. I'll talk about The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta later. I've just been really liking them, and I have read a few in the past, but I think lately I just have gotten totally back into them, and I'm super glad about that. So like I mentioned, I listened to the audiobook while following along with an ebook copy of this story, and I think that was a great way for me to consume it because there's a visual element to it because the way that the words are actually like laid out on the page is interesting and kind of changes your reading of it. However, with the audiobook, Jason Reynolds also is narrating it, and he does a great job of like putting emphasis on certain words. Like you can tell he's a performer and he's definitely performing it for you, which is really cool. So I think whether you listen to the audiobook or you physically read it or you do both at the same time or you like reread it in whatever way, basically whatever you read it, like however you read it, you will not be able to miss that it's a very meaningful and impactful story and so well written. This definitely is a story that relies on suspense, and it has such an engaging storyline because of that. It's only set over the course of 60 seconds, which is like such a quick amount of time, especially for a book. Like I think the shortest book, I don't know, I've probably read ones that are shorter, but like there's a lot of books that are set over the course of 24 hours and I'm like, wow, so cool. But like to have a book that's set over the course of 60 seconds is just wild, especially because it's not just 60 seconds of like you're going down this elevator, like elevator music is playing, whatever. It's just 60 seconds of pure emotion and agony because as Will is riding down on this elevator, he's making a huge decision. He's having this internal battle with whether he wants to murder the man who murdered his brother. So as he's going down the elevator, there's kind of a magical element to it because these different ghosts of people from his past are getting on and kind of talking him through it and being like, is this such a good idea? And it was such an interesting method to kind of dissect this thought process because I think in reality, he would be, you know, just thinking like, what would this person think? Like, what would my brother think? But having them actually step on the elevator and be a presence there with him was so much more meaningful. I think Will himself though was a great character, but he's also not super distinctive and not super memorable. But I think that was an intentional decision by the author because it's kind of an allegorical story. Over the course of this book, it's addressing gun violence and how it particularly affects marginalized youth and how they feel trapped in this system that perpetuates violence, and he feels like he has to. He feels like he has no other option. He's like, he killed my brother, so now I have to kill him, which then becomes this cycle of violence, which is analyzed really well over the course of this book. It's done so in a universal way, but you also have such a realistic character that makes it even more universal, if that makes any sense at all. Basically, he's super realistic that he's a character you feel like you know, and I think in that way, it's like kind of, it could be anyone almost who is stuck in this system. As it's a novel in verse, this isn't a long book at all. You can read it super quickly, definitely in one sitting if you have the time. Like if you have an hour or two, you can definitely read this or listen to the audiobook for it. And while it's short, it's one of the most impactful books I've read because of the method of storytelling and the setting. Everything was well thought out, and how thoughtful it was came across with every single word. Everything was chosen. Like I think that's why I like novels in verse so much, because there's so fewer words that it's more of a conscious decision to use this word, and I love seeing how an author manipulates language to tell their story. I think that's just very fascinating to me, and I think this book was a great example of how well that can be done. So definitely would recommend this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It left me thinking. It definitely wasn't an easy read. I feel like maybe a 4.5 is a better rating for it. Like it really did impact me, and I think like having talked about it more, I'm realizing that more. So a 4.5 out of 5 stars I feel like is a great rating for it. Next up, I read Let's Talk About Love by Kann. I've had my eye on this book for a really long time, and I'm glad that I finally read it. So it follows Alice, who is asexual and biromantic, and at the beginning of the book, her girlfriend breaks up with her because she comes out to her as ace. So Alice is like, I'm completely done with dating, but then she's working the summer at a library and she ends up meeting her new coworker Takumi, and he kind of changes everything for her. She's like, ooh, like she gets a really big crush on him and just feels like maybe I can take a chance on a relationship again. Her summer was perfectly planned out, but then things kind of go awry, and Takumi is there right when she needs him to help her through it. A main topic of this is asexuality and romance, but that's not the only thing that's going on for it. That's also not the only thing that you know about Alice. She's like a fully rounded character, but there are definitely a lot of different things that are brought up about asexuality. There's definitely instances of acephobia in here, and this did a great job of answering a lot of questions surrounding asexuality and how romance relates to it and what that spectrum is like. Now, I personally am not ace, so I can't speak to the representation for it, but I know that this has been touted as a really good book for that representation by Own Voices reviewers, by the way. That was an important part of that sentence that I left out. I liked how it dealt with asexuality universally too, because it was what asexuality means for Alice, but also what it might mean for other people on a broader scale, and that was definitely brought into the story frequently. Now, Alice is a super strong character. This is one of the most character-driven stories that I have read in a long time. She just had such a distinctive voice to her and was so well fleshed out, and this definitely thrives on her internal monologue. Like, there's a lot of instances where she has thoughts and kind of asides to herself in parentheses, which I know might not mesh with a lot of people, but I actually really liked it. I thought it was a fun, cute addition to the story. I think my ultimate issue with the plot being so driven by her character is that there were a lot of times where there wasn't much of an external plot, and I felt like it would have benefited from more of that. Also, I wanted to mention, because I just looked at it, but there's like a little ace on the side, which I just think is so cute. For Alice's personality, she's a little bit juvenile, and I don't think that's like a negative thing. She just has an interesting way of seeing things, and I think at times she did read like more of a high schooler, because she is actually in university in this book, which was a major selling point for me. I was super excited about that because there are hardly any books where the characters are university age. It's more so like new adult, which is basically romance, so like there's not a lot of them, so I'm always really glad when I find one. And I did, like, you could tell she was in university because a lot of the decisions and a lot of the discussions brought up and how her life operated was very university, but I felt like she was definitely on the younger end, just with some of the things she would say and like how she would see the world almost. But that's not really a negative, it's just kind of like a thing that I noticed. She does have such a distinctive voice and a specific worldview and a kind of happy-go-lucky outlook on things almost, but she also, like, it's not like so much so that she's intolerable. She's really enjoyable because of it. Like, I really admired her as a character because every decision was super well thought out. She overthinks everything, which is so relatable and also stressed me out sometimes just because like I do that, and like to read it in another character was a lot at times. But where was I even going with that? I had a thought that I was going with that, but I don't even remember because I started thinking about overthinking, and now like here I am. What was I gonna say? Oh, so she never goes the easy route, which was really interesting. She like doesn't think about, like, she'll have a decision to make and she's like not thinking about, okay, what would be the easiest way for me to do this? She's kind of like, what would be the best way for me to do this, almost, if that makes any sense. There's also really positive depictions of therapy in this book, which was nice. So she starts to see a therapist and it's just kind of like talking through her problems and trying to figure things out, and her therapist is genuinely really helpful and understanding, because I feel like a lot of times when you see therapists in books, they're like kind of a villainous character, or they're just like not good. Like, I think of All the Bright Places, like they're just not very helpful and not a good therapist, but she goes to therapy and it's just like normal. It's like whatever, like she's going to therapy. It's not a problem. I think one of the most interesting things in this book for me was the fact that it wasn't really a story about Alice accepting herself and accepting her identity, which I feel like there are a lot of stories like that. It's more so she's trying to kind of figure out where she fits in the world and how others might, like, how to express herself to other people almost. I just feel like it wasn't the typical narrative in terms of her understanding of herself and her self-discovery. She knows who she is and she's proud of it. I think she's just trying to figure out the other things around that. Particularly, she's having a lot of struggles with her parents. So she has a big family. She is way younger than her siblings and they have great relationships, but her parents are putting a lot of pressure on her to get a good career. They have a specific thing in mind for her, but it's not what she wants. And she's struggling to kind of reconcile that and figure out a way to do what she wants, but also please her parents. But at the same time, she comes from money. And this is what I mean when I say like she doesn't take the easy way out. She comes from money, but she knows that if she goes a different career path, she's going to be completely on her own financially, but she doesn't really let that deter her. She's kind of just like, okay, like it is what it is. I want to live my life. This is my passion. This is what I want to do. And it's what I'm going to do, which is very admirable. Now, while this brought up a lot of really important things, it also was a super, super cute and light and fluffy read, which I so appreciated because that's really what I had been looking for. And it definitely like checked that box. But the friendships in here were kind of a little meh, particularly the the conflicts surrounding some of the friendships, I felt like the resolution was a little bit, is that really resolution? And that kind of bugged me a little bit. I haven't really talked about Takumi much, but the relationship and romance between Takumi and Alice was super sweet and enjoyable, and I think Takumi made a lot of effort to understand her asexuality, and he, not even understand, I mean, it's not really something that he has to understand, it's just who she is, but for him to be respectful of it, I guess, is more so what I'm trying to say. And whenever he would make a mistake or say something wrong, he would always apologize and own up to it and promise to do better, and then also like actually actively do better, which is the most important part. So I think he definitely was a great character and also a really great love interest for her. I think I would have enjoyed this a little bit more had there been some more stuff going on outside of the internal conflict. I think that it would have benefited from some things happening outside, because I felt like a lot of the conflict that was happening outside felt really manufactured, and there were kind of some moments of stagnancy because of the lack of conflict. But I did like it overall, so I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so I thought it was a solid read, and I'm glad that I read it. And she has another book out, If It Makes You Happy, that I will definitely be picking up. Next, I read and listened to, because I actually read this one twice, but it is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. So I listened to the audiobook for this one, but then I found out from Bowties and Books they were reading it, and I saw on their Instagram that there were illustrations in it, and I was like, oh my god. So I found out that the UK copy has illustrations in it, so I got the ebook for the UK copy, and I was just reading it and physically reading it and enjoying the beautiful little illustrations that were added and peppered in throughout, so it was a really great reading experience. But this is, once again, like I said, another novel in verse, so it's a story through poetry, and like I feel like that was the perfect method to tell this story. So it's kind of like a drag queen origin story, and I say that because you follow Michael, the main character, from a super young age all the way to when he's in university and discovers drag, and you're following him as he is learning to accept who he is and learning who he is, not even learning to accept it, but he's figuring out who he is and where he fits in the world and how he can express himself. And he finally finds drag and realizes that this is the perfect form of self-expression that he has always been looking for, the perfect outlet for him to be who he really is. This was such a beautiful story. Like, I think it deals with self-discovery and finding your voice and being who you are and being so proud of that in a great way. It takes you on so many highs and lows, because it's a great story about him not only accepting his identity as a gay teen, or not even a teen, but as a gay man, but also as a mixed race gay man, which is adding another layer of struggle for him. I think it's because you start off with Michael at such a young age and you get to see him with his family, and like I just felt so invested in him as a character. Like I feel like I know him and I got to watch him grow up, and it was beautiful. Like he's such a sweet character. Oh my goodness. Like just watching him learn about who he was, and especially there's times where he's kind of like a little bit like Goldilocks, like he's trying on these different clubs, he's trying out these different groups and trying them on to see what actually fits him, and you just want him to find the perfect fit for him because you know it's going to be a magical moment when he does, and like you're just like so intrigued by him and just want the best for him and want to like hold his hand as he's going on this journey through life. A lot of Michael's struggles come from the fact that toxic masculinity in society is not what he fits with at all, and he is not interested in that, but he's kind of trapped in a box because of that, and he's trying to break free from that and find a way that he can do that. I loved the verse method of telling this story. I think it worked perfectly because there's a lot of layers and nuance to it, and I think it made it a very powerful story. It definitely fit the actual storyline for it to be told in such a way. This was definitely another really internally focused book, but I think it had a better balance of the internal versus the external, and I think that it didn't bug me so much that it was almost completely internal because it's a novel told in verse, so it made a lot of sense for it to be mostly focused on Michael and his thoughts and his views of the world. Overall, this was just such an empowering story. It's all about discovering who you are and being proud of it and knowing your truth and living it to the fullest, and I think it's definitely a book that should be a classic. Like it's one that I can see myself reading again and again and getting like a new message from it every time because it has so much to tell you, and I love that so much. So I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it it was super. So the last few books I have to talk about are actually graphic novels, so I probably won't talk for as long about them just because I feel like I don't generally have as much to say about a graphic novel because they're so much shorter. But the first one is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Oseman. This one in particular I'm not going to say a ton about because it is the third volume in this series, but this is a series that follows a male-male romance. You have a bisexual character as well as a gay character, and there are also a lot of side characters that are LGBTQ+, including there's a trans character that definitely comes into the limelight in this story, which was really nice to get to know more about them. But anyways, to give you a little synopsis, so this is actually a series that initially is released as webcomics and then is bound up and released to like actually published books, and I don't read the webcomics, I wait for the bind-ups to come out. But you follow Nick and Charlie, and in this volume they are going on a trip to Paris with their school, which is a lot of fun. This was definitely my favorite so far. I love the fact that there were a lot of characters in the supporting cast that were brought more to the forefront, and you got to know a little bit more about them and their relationships and where they've come from, and I thought that was lovely. You also have so much representation in these stories. Oseman does a great job of that. I'm sorry, it's like real late, so I can't even speak anymore. But as with the other volumes, this one was a perfect mix of those really cute and heartwarming scenes, but also having some more serious topics. So there is a trigger warning for this one regarding eating disorders that starts to come into the story more so, but there are also some mentions of self-harm and anxiety and also instances of homophobia, so just beware of that. I love the relationship between Nick and Charlie. I think it is the sweetest. I think they are like perfect for each other, and I love watching their relationship develop over the course of each volume of these books. It's just a delight. So I don't really want to spoil you guys, so I'm not going to say much more about it, but I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was a great installment. Next, I read Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Zhu. I wish I had read this around fall and Halloween because it's perfect for that time of year. So if you haven't read it yet, definitely read it around that time of year because it definitely fits that, because it is a witchy paranormal story. So Nova works at her grandmother's bookshop where they have like this room where they give spell books to different people and stuff, and she ends up running into her old childhood crush Tam, who is a werewolf. Now Tam has been wandering around trying to find a place that they can call home for a long time, but they have been unable to. They're running away from a bad home situation, so Nova and her grandmothers end up taking them in. So Nova has 2 grandmothers, so there's a female-female relationship in here, and Tam's pronouns are they, them, so there's also some trans representation. Tam and Nova are also Chinese American, and their culture comes into the story a lot, and Nova has lost her parents, but they are still pretty prevalent characters in it, and family overall is really prevalent and important to the story, including found family, which was so lovely to read about. I also loved the art style for it. The colors that were used were beautiful. Like, it was just spooky, but also just like really cute at the same time. There's also a really cute kind of second chance romance plotline going on, which is one of my favorite things. So I loved that romance. I thought it was absolutely adorable and so sweet. But there's also a plot line that has some more action to it, which is like they're trying to hunt this demon thing. I think though that plotline fell a little bit flat for me. I felt like the dialogue and the storyline was kind of cookie cutter at times. I don't know if it's middle grade or not, and I'm not using that as like an insult, like middle grade is bad or anything, but it was very like kind of like following a standard plot line, so I knew what was going to happen and nothing was really surprising me, and that's why I ask if it's middle, well, not ask, but that's why I'm curious if it's middle grade or not, because with middle grade I feel like that would be a little bit more understandable because you're not kind of getting into those really complex plot lines at all yet. But I do kind of wish that it had gone to that next level with the plotline, and the dialogue kind of was a little bit flat and didn't really have that much life to it, so I feel like there could have been a little bit more life brought to that, but the art was absolutely beautiful and I did really like it and gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally is Princess Ever After by Katie O'Neill. So this one is definitely going to be brief because it's a super short book, but I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So the heroic Princess Amira rescues Sadie from the tower where she has been waiting, and they end up just just starting to travel together and discover that they're a great match together, and they're just going on a journey. So it's a middle grade graphic novel, and it's like super easy to read because of that, but it's also a Rapunzel retelling, which is so fun. And it's also a female Rapunzel retelling, which is like even better. But I loved how much representation the story had. The art was once again beautiful. This is the author of the Tea Dragon Society, which I've only read the first book, but I do want to read the other two because it is so cute and their art style is absolutely gorgeous. I am obsessed with it. There were a lot of positive messages coming from this graphic novel, which I think would be really inspiring, especially to a younger audience. It's challenging a lot of gender roles, and you also have Sadie as a plus-sized princess, and that was just so lovely to see. She was really inspiring, and just the relationship between Sadie and Amira was so cute. This was just a super quick read that was also adorable, and I liked it a lot, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So that is all for part 2 of my books that I read during quarantine. I have one more part to go until I'm caught up with like what I'm reading now, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I read quite a few graphic novels in this portion. I don't know if I have any more for the following ones. I don't think so, but we'll see. But I've kind of been getting back into graphic novels because I kind of struggle with them. I don't know why. Like, I think I like more so descriptions than to actually see an image. I love looking at them, but I don't always love the dialogue or the storyline. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I did like all the ones that I have read so far this year. So please let me know if you have read any of these books, your thoughts on them. I would love to know, and I will see you guys in my next video soon. Bye!